Our first panel discussion topic will be cotton quality, challenges, and remediation ahead 2022. And for this panel discussion, I would like to call the moderator, Mr. Kamran Arshad, CEO of Ghazi Fabrics. And the panelists are Mr. Peltzer, Director, Cargill, Cotton Limited, UK, Mr. Jeff Elder, Director, Marketing, Allbright Cotton, USA, Mr. Carlo, Bocardo, Vice President of Sales, Calcot Limited, USA, and Mr. Mazhar Mirza, CCI.
Good afternoon, late good afternoon. The topic of this particular discussion is cotton quality, challenges, and remediation ahead for the year 2022. The first question that we have open for discussion with all the incoming CCI experts is, with global inflation, increasing interest rates, and the rising costs of raw materials that have placed major obstacles to growing businesses, how do you foresee its impact on the global cotton trade? So we will just gather opinions and form a collective view.
I'll take this on to start the program. Certainly the issues that you've mentioned are causing a lot of concern within the cotton trade. So with the higher commodity prices, the higher transportation costs, there's a strain on our cash flow. And then of course the inability to get cotton delivered and shipped like we would want is causing us much more difficulty in turning our cash over, and it's also creating a strain between the trade and our mill-use customers. So certainly it's causing us some concern. I think the biggest issue, though, is that it's causing more volatility. So currently we're sitting in a situation where we have more volatility in the price of cotton. We have more volatility, probably historic volatility, in the transportation costs. We have historic volatility in the ability to get transportation performed. And I think also we're seeing maybe not historic, but we're seeing a lot of volatility in the demand situation. So if we were to look at a year ago, home furnishings was having record good times, I guess you would call them. And right now, of course, it's very quiet and it's very constrained. A year ago, we saw the apparel market was very constrained, mainly due to COVID. And now we're seeing that business has picked up. So in almost every area of our business now, we're seeing more volatility. And I really think what the global trade has to do is it has to find better ways to put more emphasis on that volatility and then to manage the risks that are associated with it. And I think it has to be shared across the supply chain so that the end result is that when the consumer walks into the store, he finds the product that he's looking for in the size that he's looking for. And that's really what the challenge is going to be for us, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. I would also just like to say that we're not doing all of this in isolation. I mean, if you're in the United States and you want to buy an automobile, you might be backlogged 4 to 8 months just to get that automobile. If you want to buy a new piece of furniture, you might be backlogged as much as 9 to 12 months to get that piece of furniture. So I think that this is something that's going to be inherited across a lot of different products, and I think that our industry is as well prepared and as well sophisticated to manage that challenge as any other industry that's out there. So I'm still very optimistic that there's going to be continued growth in our industry, and we will learn how to manage these risks and move forward.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the detailed analysis. Mr. Mirza, would you like to comment?
I think the main thing from demand and supply side, that's volatile, because if we go back before COVID, there was a clear trend with regard to fashion, with regard to the sellability at the retail chain stores, and the consumer, they knew very well what they're going to buy. But during this COVID times, a lot of things got upset and that got changed with regard to the final clothing, because cotton is basically related to the final product, which is to be sold on the final shelves of the retail stores. So due to the COVID, when a lot of things got shut down all over in the world, so people also started changing their buying habits. They were buying online, and then they were buying only those things which were more casual. They were not more on towards fashion, because everybody was operating from home. Suddenly when this COVID went over and the word got over, then people have excess money to buy the things, and then they bought a lot. But unfortunately, then there is a break. Then we had this overall world recession. So to Jeff's point, what's happened is that then there was, you never know if you can plan 3 months ahead, 4 months ahead, 1 year ahead. So we have to wait for these things to get settled down. So I'm also positive that when this season is over, when we're going to have the next season at the chain retail stores, the designers, the buying directors, they are going to correct their inventories in their chain stores, and then hopefully after one season we're going to come back to this normal thing. That's my point on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mirza. Carlo, would you like to comment on this situation?
Yeah, I certainly agree with what Jeff and Mazhar just said. I don't want to be too repetitive. If anything, just to maybe emphasize that I'm also optimistic about our future, the future of our industry, but it might slow down a little bit. Before COVID, we were afraid that things were going to collapse. It didn't. Things didn't collapse. We adjusted. We working from home, did much shopping online, et cetera, et cetera. And whatever we suffered through the COVID years, we recovered so quickly last year. Going forward, because everything has been mentioned already, being more expensive, inflation, recession, et cetera, obviously, and most importantly, at least in the US, the lack of help from the government as far as funds, then I do anticipate demand slowing down. And I don't know how significant it's going to be, but that might be compensated for another thing that we're going to discuss a little bit later, which is the production side. So personally, I think things are going to slow down a little bit for us.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to comment? Rising costs, inflation.
Everything that's been said before, but just to highlight, in my opinion, these issues we face today are not necessarily new, but they are extreme. I would reiterate or emphasize what Jeff touched upon. There's a lot of experience and maturity within the chain, and I can see it's everybody managing it, but they have to have their eyes open about the price risk and the supply risk going forward with these extreme challenges today.
Okay, let's move on to the second question. Cotton production globally is facing a huge setback as the weather conditions in Texas, which accounts for more than half of U.S. cotton output, has dwindled substantially, and there's been a significant downgrade in the last USDA report, and God knows what's coming in the September USDA report. China, India, Pakistan, and Brazil are also suffering. How badly will this projected crop shortfall globally affect the textile sector? If we can start with you. Go ahead.
I will continue with the point that I was trying to make regarding production. No doubt, the U.S. is down significantly, and we are not done yet. As you are well aware, we have one of the worst droughts ever registered in the state of Texas, which is the biggest production state in the U.S. Normally, Texas will produce anything from 6 to 7 million bales. Now, we're hopefully going to harvest around 2.5 million bales or so. But like I said, we just started harvesting, so who knows what that number is going to be. Same situation, opposite reason here in Pakistan. I think the USDA was carrying 6.2 million bales to be produced here, and now God knows what's going to be. Some people are talking about 2 million bales less. I don't really know, but certainly on the production side is going to be less cotton. What is that going to do? That instantly provides price support. So Jeff was talking earlier about volatility. It's all over. The prices are all over, and that's not good for anyone. If demand is going to slow down, then it suggests that prices should come down. But with the tight production we're going to have, we might find that support. So finding that balance, it's going to be interesting in the year that is ahead of us. So we'll see.
Interesting. Further comments from the floor?
In this particular year, Supply there's some question about supply, but really I think the big question that everybody's answering themselves is what is the demand going to be like? And with, again, rising prices across all commodities, fuel, energy, anything that anybody gets involved in, they're paying higher prices. I think the big question out there this year, more so than supply, which we're starting to get a handle on, is going to be what is the demand and how are the two going to match up?
I think another concern is with the U.S. crop. Originally was projected at 16.5 million back in June. Then that number got revised down to 15.5 in July. August it got revised down to 12.5. While there is a recession, or maybe the U.S. was in a recession, or a recession's coming, even if you take off 30-35% demand for the fiber, I think the actual supply will be substantially lesser than what the demand shrinkage would actually be. And once there are order placements for, let's say, spring-summer season 2023, and when that demand eventually comes in October, November, even though globally the textile industry is going through a difficult phase right now, whether it's recession-induced or the fear of a recession, whenever that demand comes, one of the biggest worries because of this global output reduction is that demand shrinkage will be outpaced by the shortage of cotton supply globally. So that is a real and present danger, which is not staring everybody in the eye right now, but eventually it will down the line.
It's really identifying is the reduction in production or reduction in demand greater than reduction in production for the coming months. I think that's a bigger question that has yet to be answered. How quickly it recovers the demand, it can be quick or it can take longer than that. So I think it's a very open question that will only be ascertained over several months.
Okay.
Kamran sir, I feel that this demand, as Jeff said, is going to drive and correct the supply, because that's the demand-supply economic rule which is now going to work. We saw in the beginning that the prices were very high, and then prices started going down, and then suddenly when USDA declared this shortage of crop, again prices started going up. Then from this fashion industry point of view, few of the customers that I'm dealing with in Germany and in Europe, in France, they are also started asking to have a kind of product mix. So not maybe 100% cotton, if there is something polyester or something in it.
Synthetic.
This is synthetic, yeah, that something is going in. And to your point, that demand is going to definitely lead. And then supply we know already now, which is so the designers, they are going to also adjust their product and product composition accordingly.
Okay. Thank you for all the informed views. Let's move to the next question. As the global oil and freight prices are skyrocketing, which has increased transportation and fertilizer costs and ultimately adds to the US cotton prices and cotton prices globally, compared to domestic cotton, our local cotton, what will be the effect on the affordability of US cotton globally with rising global oil and freight prices? Do you see freight rates coming down, or do you see the backlog of ships outside Long Beach, California, or Savannah, Georgia reducing? If you'd like to comment.
Well, I'll start on this one, and there was some good news that I read just earlier this morning, in that the number of delayed vessels off the coast of Long Beach is the lowest it's been in 2 years. So they were talking about just 7 vessels that were making their way into Long Beach. So and one of the other issues is that there was a labor dispute, or not a dispute, there was a labor contract within the rail industry, and that was resolved yesterday also. So there are some good things happening on that ground, but in general what I would say is that those countries that are consuming their own cotton, so if we take the countries India, China, Pakistan, Turkey, they have a much larger textile industry than they have local production. So they're still going to be in the importing business. And if we look at the major exporters out there, be it the United States, Australia, Brazil, West Africa, these other countries are experiencing equal to or more increases in their transportation costs than the United States is. So personally, my feeling is that there's still going to be a demand for U.S. cotton. U.S. cotton, probably those transportation costs will ease sooner in the United States than they will in places like Brazil and Australia. So I think actually it may have a little bit of advantage. And I also think that the higher commodity prices are going to allow the origin to absorb some of those higher costs so that we are competitive against locally produced cotton.
What about inland issues like trucking or labor, availability of drivers, equipment?
Unfortunately, it's going to get worse, particularly in California. So in California, starting in January of 2023, there's a new rule that no trucks that are older than 2010 are going to be allowed into the port facility, and that's going to eliminate about 75,000 trucks in California. So this was a law that was passed back in 2006. Of course, when they passed it, they didn't know that it would come into effect at a time that there's such a constraint on transportation and such a backlog. So it remains to be seen what the outcome of that is, but there are still going to be issues.
Carlo, you'd like to comment?
Jeff covered it perfectly. The only thing that I think it was not mentioned is the labor situation. It's also very challenging. It's not only availability of the vessel or trucks and all the regulations that we have in California regarding how old it should be, availability of chassis, and it's all a chain that is linked together. But at the end, we need someone to drive that truck and bring that cotton from the warehouses to the port or take that container to the warehouse. And we're struggling also in the U.S. to find that experienced driver can help us. So, challenges that we're trying to overcome, and we're trying to stay on top of it as an industry and making sure that our legislators are considering us and don't forgetting us and lobbying in Washington, D.C. to get things resolved and get the help that we need.
Problem is oil prices go up, then they come down by $5 within a day, and then next 3 days they recover. The alternates are fairly expensive to oil, so in my opinion, I don't see freight costs or this phenomena reducing anytime soon because it's directly related to Brent crude oil or WTI crude oil. So I don't really see freight costs coming down, but yes, with slowing global trade, that can have an impact on freight rates coming down. Would you like to comment on this?
I think the softening, will they go back to pre-COVID-19? Not a chance. I think it's important to highlight in this part of the world, the Indian subcontinent, the challenges have been even greater sourcing freight. The shippers have made it quite clear over the last 12 months this is not a preference for them, and they've concentrated on other flows. So that's going to be an additional challenge for this area to soften those freight rates, but more importantly, get more freight availability for this area.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the next round. The world has witnessed price fluctuations in cotton. Such massive fluctuations can not only be due to the supply and demand gap, like we saw July expire, go off the board, and then all of a sudden we were down from highs of $1.45 on when July went off. December saw highs of $1.25, $1.30, and then it fell as low as 81, 82 before recovering back to 90, then from 90 to $1, then it went up to $1.19, then it came back to $1.12, 13, what it closed at yesterday. So given those price fluctuations, all those price fluctuations cannot be attributed to the demand and supply gap. Commodity exchanges in these fluctuations play a huge role, and so do speculators come in as well, who don't really have anything to do with the physical delivery or taking possession of the fiber itself. They just benefit off the price rise and exit via options, calls, or futures trading. In the foreseeable future, how do you see this factor being a potential threat to the global textile world? This is interesting.
Yeah, there are ways to mitigate that risk. I would work with your suppliers and shippers. You have to come up with not just a short-term view, but a long-term view. But that volatility, as the panel's already highlighted, is here to stay, unfortunately. the price may move 400 to 500, 600 points nowadays in a heartbeat.
Yes, certainly. We have had really bad experiences with in this particular topic back in 2011. It was horrible, you know, to the point that it was necessary to implement new rules to regulate the participation of speculators and whatnot, to try to make at least the specific cotton market more about the industry than a way to gamble or cover for the risk that other people may have in other markets. So anyway, I think there's been a lot of progress. In this particular case, it's a combination of things that started with COVID, and now it's with the inflation factor. It's really affecting and putting pressure. Same as you were saying, I witnessed it a month ago. I was in India, and we were having this presentation, same presentation that we're having here today, and we were trying to send a message how domestic were things, you know, how good the textile industry is going to boom, et cetera, and you know, in less than a week, the market dropped 20 cents. So nowadays, we were talking yesterday, oh, the market is only down 3 cents. Oh, the market is only down. Only? That's a lot. Used to be a lot. So we will hopefully continue to find ways to minimize the effect of the volatility when it doesn't have to do with fundamental factors that affect our industry.
Okay, thank you.
Price volatility on the raw material is going to affect the whole supply chain, and the biggest pressure is going to come to the suppliers or the manufacturers, because when you book an order, you have to deliver it after 90 to 120 days, and then you have to buy the raw material. There are a few vertical setup, but there are a few bills who are just the garment manufacturer or the bedsheet manufacturer. They are in trouble because they have fixed the sale price with their buyers, customers, brand and retailers, and then they have to now cover the whole supply chain at their back, whether in the form of fabric or in the form of yarn. And the yarn prices are related to the latest cotton price on that day. So if they are lucky, the prices are going down or stable, maybe that's fine for them. But if it's going up, but still you see they have already made the contract, then there's a big challenge for them. So there's nothing they can do because raw material has about 60% contribution in the total product, and they cannot cover much from their operation side. So the only thing they have in their hand is their operational things, if they can be more smarter to cover a few cents. Otherwise, they will have a challenge because the brand and retailer and the buyers, they have already bought the product and they are set their retail prices for the consumers already. So they have to set at that price and buy at that price. So there will be the biggest challenge could be on the suppliers or the manufacturers in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, other countries.
Thank you. Your view?
A little bit more fortunate in that most of the product that I deal with, we don't, it's an unhedgeable commodity because it's FEMA cotton, so I'm a little bit fortunate that I don't have to deal in that risk management as much as most. But the only benefit I think that there is out there in this industry is that the supply chain is long enough between ourselves and the consumer that the consumer is at least insulated in these price fluctuations. If you're talking about gasoline or some other commodity, that consumer is facing those fluctuations every day, whereas here they're fairly well insulated. So I don't think ultimately it changes, how much the consumer is going to consume at the end of the day, but it creates a lot of heartache and issues within the supply chain.
Thank you. Thank you for all the views. I just, as a manufacturer, I sincerely hope that genuine demand can be isolated from synthetic demand, whereby speculators come in for profit taking or are able to forecast better than global manufacturers what supply in a certain year is going to be, and without taking physical delivery of the commodity, they are able to jack prices up of the fiber. And at times we see raw material getting totally dislinked with the end product or whatever a pair of jeans sells at for somewhere at Walmart or Target or Kohl's or any major global retailer. So I hope, and this is my plea to ICA or to other cotton associations all around the world, if they can sort of figure out how to isolate the speculators from the genuine demand, because we saw this back in 2010, 2011, when the global economy was probably much lesser in size than what it is today. We saw that price rise from 75, 80 cents up to $2.25. And it probably came down, it went up like a rocket, came down like a inverted V, and mills got hurt, manufacturers got hurt. So I hope we are able to avoid that sort of a situation, knowing fully well that we are facing a supply shortage globally. All right, next question. And this is close to my heart. As the world's natural resources are depleting at a faster rate, and there's a constant battle between farmland, between edibles and non-edibles for farmland acreage, industries are shifting to alternative cellulosic fibers. Do you see this as a threat to the cotton world vis-a-vis climate change, heat waves globally, the drought that we've seen now over West Texas, certain areas of China? Do you see this as a threat to cotton supply or farmland acreage being dedicated globally to cotton versus other edible crops?
Or non-edible crops. It is a challenge, but we're not. I'm personally not too sure the scalability of that. Cotton is a unique plant. It can grow in extreme conditions, but what it does need is good seed, a strong seed to do that. So I'm hopeful that cotton maintains that share. It will have to fight and work hard to do that, but yeah, I'm positive about that. I mean, if we look at overall fiber share within the world, cotton still is 24, 25 million tons of total fiber share. Total fibers being 65, whatever million tons. It's a healthy share, and it's been pretty steady around there for several years, despite the threat, despite the innovations of other fibers, etc., etc. That will continue, but yes, cotton has to keep ahead of itself and continue its innovative ways to produce a bigger crop and a stronger crop.
I agree. Certainly, there's two aspects. One is the demand side, the other is the production side. As the consumer becomes more aware of the environment, et cetera, they may prefer one fiber over the other. And then from the production side, at least in the U.S., a grower has the option. Every single grower in the U.S. has the option to produce not only different cotton varieties, but also different crops. So they decide what to grow at a certain point in time based on economic factors, not necessarily related to cotton, but certainly the price of the relative price of competitive crops. So they will decide, I want to do cotton, or I want to do alfalfa, I want to do hay, I want to do tomatoes. I mean, they make a decision based on that. And if the cotton price is good, that's all. It's that's bottom line.
The incentive, yeah.
Exactly. So they will make the decision based on that. So.
Thank you.
I think because this particular question is related to cotton USA, US cotton industry is already doing a great job because of this US Cotton Trust Protocol presentation, which audience has just seen from Steph, where this spider wall print, where they have able to reduce the area, but the yield has gone up, and the water usage has really gone down while the same kind of acre. So I think this technology, because of the water shortage or this drought, need to be adopted more and more. And then this precision agriculture things and GPS things need to be adopted, which Cotton USA is already doing in USA. Probably the other cotton growing countries, they have to do that. In Pakistan, we are quite far behind because it's flooding our cotton fields. So probably we need to do the same thing in Pakistan as well.
Okay, thank you. Your viewpoint?
I'll just quickly add, I do think the cotton is still an aspirational purchase for many people around the world. And so I think that they're going to have to maintain their competitiveness against other crops. Of course, I'm saying that coming from a state where in 1995 there was 1.5 million acres and it was the largest crop in the state of California. And today there's less than 100,000 acres, or barely 100,000 acres. So, in that particular state, there's 240 crops that are being grown, and cotton just was not able to maintain its competitiveness against these other crops. But I still do think, again, it's an aspirational purchase on behalf of a lot of consumers, and they're going to be willing to pay enough to motivate growers to continue to produce it.
Thank you, gentlemen. I guess we can learn a lot from one another, and as much as I'd like to continue this discussion, probably a few more panels have to come on board. But it's always good to have this exchange of views, learn from one another, and it's going to be a very tricky and challenging year for the buyers, for the sellers, for the intermediaries. But let's hope we all come out of this in one piece. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.